In this episode, I get to hit things with a hammer, point at things with a stick, look up answers, and build up my grip strength.
Major funding for this program was provided by clicking the like button, with additional support from the Super Thanks program and subscribers like you. Thank you.
What started this whole thing was finding out the brake bleeder screw was corroded solid in the caliper. It was really stuck, and I didn't want to snap it off and then have to drill it out and tap it out. Besides, I happen to have a brand new caliper already on the shelf. So, like every normal person, I started off by rubber banding my car keys to the brake pedal. I got out the tools I would need and put them on a tray to work from. Things like a hammer and punch, some needle nose pliers, a couple of line wrenches, a digital caliper, some brake lubricant, a screwdriver, and a stick with a green triangle on the end. After jacking up the car and removing the wheel, I used a pair of needle nose pliers to remove the limit clips. There are 4, 2 on the top shim and 2 on the bottom. With the hammer and punch, I drove out the upper shim plate. The top one was so jammed in, I had to pry a little bit with a screwdriver. Next was the lower shim. I lifted the caliper off the bracket and set it on the front suspension. Then I removed the brake pads and set them aside. The brake rotor is fairly new, but to be safe, I looked up the minimum thickness requirements. This workshop manual has all the specs for torques and tolerances. It looks like I need at least 9 millimeters of thickness. With the caliper and brake pads out of the way, I checked that with a digital gauge. There is a ridge of rust that I want to avoid, so I get a reading off the actual swept area. Looks like I have more than 10 millimeters. Plenty of metal left to keep using this rotor. Next out are the anti-chatter springs. These are meant to hold the pads firmly and keep them quieter. Notice that the side that faces the rotor is straight, and the outer portion has this cutout to it. I wanted to take out the bracket to clean and paint it. There are 2 17mm bolts to remove. I just wire wheeled and sanded the bracket lightly and then painted it in high temperature black. I started both bolts by hand and then snugged them down with the ratchet. Back to the manual to find the correct torque setting. It's 25 pounds-feet, or about 34 Newton meters. I set the torque wrench and began to tighten these down. The anti-chatter springs went in with that flat side towards the rotor. I added a tiny blorp of synthetic brake lube where the bracket meets the brake pads. The paint wear on the back shows this pad was on the piston side. I reused these pads as they have plenty of material left on them, and they are already bedded down to this brake rotor. I pivoted the caliper in by rolling it between the lower lip and the spring, pushing down a little to situate it between the upper spring and lip, and adding some more brake lube to the shim plates. Just enough where they contact the caliper and bracket to help the sliding action and protect against rust. Too much lube will just attract more dirt and make a mess. With the clips and shims in place, it was now time to take on the fluid part of the job. The new brake hose has two very different ends on it. There's the round banjo fitting that attaches to the caliper bolt, and the threaded end that has two flat sides to anchor it to the body bracket. There is a U-shaped metal clip that holds the hose. I applied my two line wrenches, 10mm and 17mm, to loosen the steel line from the old hose. Once disconnected, I used a flat screwdriver to pop the U-clip out. Installing was just the reverse. I lined up the flats on the hose connector and reinserted the metal clip. Then it was just a tightening up with the 10mm line wrench. The banjo fitting gets two copper washers, one between the bolt and the fitting, and the other between the fitting and the caliper. On with some gloves and ready to assemble. Newer Fiat 124 and 2000 Spiders have a small metal bracket that rigidly locates the caliper hose. If your car came with one, be sure to put it back in the same orientation. This connection has to be extremely tight. I started by opening the brake bleeder screw. I was ready to pull new brake fluid in, down the new brake hose to fill up the caliper, and then attached my vacuum pump to draw the fluid in. It did take a while, but I needed to get all of the air out. When the air bubbles stopped, it was time to tighten the bleeder screw again. And retrieve the car keys from the brake pedal. This is my personal reminder to pump the brake pedal several times whenever working on the brakes and before driving the car. So that's my Fiat brake caliper video. I hope you enjoyed it, and I did have a lot of fun making it. And now I'm ready to keep rolling. Fiat front caliper. Scene 29, Albert, take 2, marker.
Major funding for this program was provided by clicking the like button, with additional support from the Super Thanks program and subscribers like you. Thank you.
Fiat front caliper, scene 21, Charlie, take 1, marker, and action.